Boom! What's up, everybody? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. We are now very grateful to have Guy Sengstock on the show.
Yay, gratitude received. And right back at you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We just finished a meditation before the show. It was very brief, but very nice. Yeah, Guy is very tapped into himself, very tapped into the fabric of reality. I just really enjoy him a lot, his presence a lot. He helps a lot of people in a very deep and emotional way that we hope to bring to more people. So this is what circling is. This is what the Circling Institute does. And it was initially conceived at Burning Man when you were like, oh, we're doing something pretty cool right now. And it was like, let's bring this to more people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. One question, can I swear?
Of course. Swear as
Okay,
much as you want.
cool. Do I get extra credit if I swear?
Extra credit
okay, cool.
for swearing, yeah.
Sweet. This is I like this whole thing you got going here. I'm curious about the thing I'm curious about is just, you got this TV and you got the cameras going on and you got the guy with the East Coast guy that assured he wouldn't hug me. You got the lights and you're in the middle of San Francisco. It's an interesting and occurs to me as an admirable response to being alive.
Yeah. I would thank you. Thank you. None of this could happen without Ron, the East Coast guy.
I get that.
They gave you a handshake instead of a hug.
Totally. He's like a mystic, right?
Oh, he's so tapped into. He's tapped in very interesting ways.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, he's tapped in. Yeah, Ron. What do you?
I'm not tapped. I'm I'm in prison. And they laugh.
That's called heaven, man.
It's all relative, I imagine.
Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly.
Heaven, yeah, that's right.
Relative, totally. That's.
It's a little crazy how everything's relative like that. Every breath is amazing.
So we're live stream, right?
Yeah, so we are uploading this to YouTube, yes.
Just so I get a sense of it, who's watching us? What kind of beings are?
20 to 30-year-olds. Yeah. And
So people that are older than me.
yeah, exactly. 16-year-olds.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. It's a nice way to highlight the human race. Put a couple cameras on them, have a couple good conversations, and you are really getting to the deepest way that humans connect. Let's talk about this. The Circling Institute, the effect that this has on people. I was just blessed enough to attend your workshop. It was an amazing workshop. It was really great to connect with people on that level and see other people connecting with each other. Why don't you walk us?
It was great having you. I would actually
lead.
I would love to hear your take. Like you said, something about with me that me and circling is really tapped into a deeper fabric.
Yeah. I can explain that.
Yeah, tell me what you mean.
Yeah, I would love to. So before that, I will have to aim to explain at least the basic idea of this. But let's just say that we sit down in a circle with a couple other people. And in that circle, we're not using our phones. We're not using any technology. Technology's off. We're just sitting in a circle, very peacefully, very calmly, looking at each other. And then we will ask each other how we feel. And the attention of the circle might all go onto one person at once. And this could be a 4-person circle or a 10-person circle. So everyone's attention will be on you. And I might be asked at that time, how do I feel? And I might say that I might feel a little bit of a lot of people's attention at me at once, and then how does that make me feel? And then you keep asking these questions and get deeper and deeper into the moment for that person. And then you might figure out some information about their past or about what they're anxious about in the future, and then you ask them why, learn more, try and take what they're saying and paraphrase it so that they can tell that you're listening and that you're really paying attention. So it's this process, this ongoing process in the circle for a couple hours usually of really deep connection to one another. And so when Guy specifically leads it, as you can imagine, we have mastery. Mastery is something that you gain after a couple tens of thousands of hours of working on something in your life. And he has definitely become a master, and he's still learning, and that's why I love that humility, and so many people do, is in the way that he guides the circle, the way that he taps into the moment, and really knows how to be playful. He's super playful, and with the circle, he's also paraphrasing really well. He's very emotive and expressive with his eyebrows and his cheeks and his smile and his face, which is really important because if the cosmos birthed this human face to be this most complex, this prefrontal cortex to be so complex, then we should use it to its full emotive potentials. There was a little glitch in the matrix right there. So Guy does a good job at that, and then he really helps people achieve breakthroughs in their ability to be, just to be, but also to understand the moment-to-moment interactions with themselves as well as with other people. And so then that taken to the workplace, that taken to your family, to your relationships, to your everything, it just changes your life for the better. So did that do a decent job?
Totally, like that described like the circumstances and what you saw. And I'm curious, like inside of that, everything that you described, what happened in your experience? Like, what was the impact, if there was? It seemed like there was. You seemed, your eyes were like almost dilated. You were having kind of, spiritual tics, and
totally
the drool is still there.
It's a little bit.
It's good. Yeah.
There's
I really enjoyed actually. Right at the end, you said something I thought was really, really, particularly you, like my understanding of you, in a very concentrated way, but also pointed to something I deeply relate with, and I imagine a lot of people really do, which is this thing that where tell me if I'm accurate here, but where you said, God, man, this is hard. Right? So one of the things, because this particular weekend was about the explorer stage of circling, which is an aspect about like not just being circled, and we'll probably explain more what that means, but where you're more of the facilitator. So you're practicing getting someone's world. And you were like, you came in and you were like, that was like one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. Oh my God. And you're like, and I love it. Like I'll like do anything to do this again. And like, and you were overflowing with this. What was inspiring for me was it felt like that you connected to what would make that challenge worth it. Like there was something so meaningful for you, like that you saw, like you were like, I want to do this all the time. All I want to do is circle, which I bet, and I want to explore this with you too today about like what, your job and my job in some ways are very similar.
Ridiculously similar. Ridiculous.
Totally.
Ridiculously similar. I was thinking about it all through the weekend as well. Yeah. As I was watching you in your art, I was thinking about how similar it was to what we do. So there's a difference between being circled and doing the circling. So when you are circled, it's when the circle focuses their attention on you, and so then if everyone's attention was focused on me, then Guy and other people in the circle would be circling me, and they would be asking me how I feel. They would be paraphrasing how I feel. They'd be digging deeper into my current state of being. And then when you do circling, then Guy would be potentially being circled, and then the circle would be circling him. So then you can do it on a one-on-one level, you can do it on a 5-on-1 level. And so in this workshop, it was exploring this one-on-one level. And in the one-on-one level, when you have to be the one that really gets in the person's skull, behind their eyes, in their feeling of everything that's going on to them, that changes. You can't get distracted at all. You have to be focused, you have to be zoned in, but also you have to do a great job at paraphrasing the way that they feel, because they want to feel recognized that you're actually giving them their full and I can just loop this to exactly what we do on the show, is that when the person sits across from me and they say something very complicated about the way that they're curing cancer, I will usually take the 20 seconds after they finish to summarize what they've said.
Yeah.
And at the end, when they go, "That's right," then they get the feeling of, "Holy cow, what I said just landed with that person." And that same thing applies to circling when someone paraphrases what the other person said they're feeling. And that's a very, very interesting similarity. And so when you're the person that's doing the circling to someone else, not only are you paraphrasing and you're listening, paraphrasing, and then telling how you feel about it, but you're also trying to dig deep. So you got to know what the next best question is to ask, which is very similar to what we do on the show as well. So after I would finish that summary about their cure for cancer, I would then also be ready to ask them the next question, which is, now how exactly does that molecule affect the tumor? How does that work?
Yeah.
And then I would be ready with the next question. So the same thing with circling is, if the person is talking about an emotion that they're feeling, which the emotion list is upstairs. I should have brought it downstairs, but it's this massive list of emotions that people can feel through the nonverbal communication.
Yeah, I think we were using the nonviolent communication. Nonviolent communication emotion list, and there's so many different emotions on there. And so, when somebody might be feeling anxious, you will how does that anxious actually feel? Yeah.
And so then a question like that, and then they have to dig and figure out how that anxiety feels, and then they might. And so then that's this whole process of leading the circling, and it's very difficult to do that. It's very similar to how, as an interlocutor, as somebody that's trying to dig deep into the cognition of someone's ability, is also, it's very similar with that overlap. So I'm glad that you bring that up, and we start unpacking in this way.
I'm feeling lots of affinity.
Affinity?
Affinity.
Oh, affinity. Me too. Yeah.
Just being here with you, talking about it, like finding the connections. I mean, I felt that it was interesting, because the moment where Tish introduced us, and then you came over and you walked in, and we just, it was as if we never left each other, even though we never left, like we had never even met, right?
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Those are some of my favorite introductions, because when you get introduced to somebody, and it can be a little bit like you gotta kind of like scooch your way into each other, and then there's also when you meet somebody and it's like,
well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah?
Yeah, let's hear it, Ron.
Well, you can't dance with everybody. And I get the idea you're also trying to, establish a nonviolent world, which I don't, I'm not an advocate for violence. I prefer diplomacy. But, there's a certain sense of beauty in violence. And, we can't really, I don't want to lose that altogether. I don't want to be dumbed down. Yeah. Like to be nonviolent, so that oppression can mold us like clay into something that we don't necessarily want to be in the human spirit. Violence is and has been essential in our development. You know, there's all kinds of different violence.
His key there was that he doesn't want the oppression to be able to take its shape on people because they don't know how to properly fight back.
Totally.
That seems to be the
oppression does not want us to fight back. It wants us to comply and conform. Right. And the way that you're all loving all the time, Alan, I don't think it's good. You need to tap into that darker side and exercise it, embrace it, love it. Love your hate.
What do you think?
Yeah, well, I want to get the beautiful. When you said there's beauty in violence.
Sure.
I want to get that.
Yeah.
I felt
beauty
it.
in violence. Not that. Let's take a scenario. We'll talk about the innocence of children.
Yeah.
And there's a abused child. You see an abused child being abused in every which way possible, and you understand that the abuser, may need some love and may need some forgiveness, but the beauty is in that sweet revenge for the child, in just completely annihilating to death, in a slow death, a lead pipe to the oppressor's head. There's beauty in that. When you see a child being abused and you can do something about it and pluck it out, that abuser, that oppressor, that violence, and fight back with violence to annihilation, finish the job. That's the beauty in that. I'm sure I am not alone in that, where others say, well, he got what was coming to him, and I'm kind of glad I was able to watch it. Just as in the death chamber, when we sentence someone to death, the people want to watch the person being executed. They want to watch that. Personally, that wouldn't necessarily be my thing. I'd rather do it myself.
Right.
I'd have, and I'm sure there'd be wonderful relief in that to fight back to annihilation the oppressor. So what you guys are talking about is you have to be careful, because you have to remember there's a monster among us, whether it's here in the 3D reality or beyond, that wants us to conform and comply and use us. Slavery has been the big thing since the beginning of time, and as we free the slaves, they kind of just scatter it somewhere else.
So I think what I heard was the beauty, at least what I experienced, was the beauty in the sense of ultimate care with the child. There was something with the child that was worth enough to
any
to
child,
abuse it, or to not to abuse the child, but abuse the abuser.
Get rid of the abuser and make sure it's slow. Don't be quick with a gunshot. Slow and painful, because that child will suffer in its life and be taken on directions that it not necessarily would have gone had he or she just been left alone to be a child, the innocence of a child. I'm not a big fan of child abuse, and I'm so grateful myself that I haven't come across it in my day-to-day endeavors to see a child getting whacked. I don't see that, and that's for a reason.
Totally. With him, you talked about basically what I heard is you want to see more aggression in him. Is that what?
I don't want to. I don't think he's in balance. I think he's a little too much on the light, and to each his own. He's very diplomatic, very quick to resolve an issue and not be confrontational. Where I, on the other hand, I need to let that out. Shit doesn't happen until I start screaming and yelling and kicking. And
So
and
there's
then,
the beauty too. Making shit happen. Seems to me. Now, is it for him, in your estimation? Is it that he doesn't have the other side, or is it that you see that it's there, but somehow it's just not expressed, or he's not tapped into it? Which one is it?
I couldn't say whether it is there or not in him. I just think he chooses to just lean heavy on love and positivity.
Why do you think he does that?
That's just his makeup, his chemistry. I don't know why he does it. He just feels, and I don't know where he's coming from, what kind of childhood he had, or so.
What do you make of that? Everything he said. How does that land?
He's a very loving person.
I think Ron's right. He gave a really good example a couple episodes ago where I think it was with Jordan Muscallon actually, literally another circler from Circling Europe.
I love Jordan.
I love him too.
He's like this goodness superhero or something.
Yeah, yeah, and I love how he's all Texan about it. Like it's great. So Ron brings up this example during the conversation with Jordan where he says that, oh yeah, well why don't you try and bring your goodness to the equation when you walk in on your brother molesting your daughter? And he was like, don't you want to just bring a baseball bat to his head at that point? And at that point, it's true, is that there's something that's running through you at that moment that isn't like going over there and trying to be like, hey brother, will you come and sit down with me on this couch and let me talk to you about this, about what you just did to my daughter?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't work that way, right? That's not really
Not for a lot of people.
Yeah. So that, like, within an example like that, I understand like going over there and like really getting at least aggressive with the person and probably putting my hands on their neck at least for a little bit, because that's like you're really ruining somebody else's soul is what you're doing, and you can't ruin a child's soul. That is horrible to do.
Right.
And so at that point, like, physical aggression is almost the only thing that can slap somebody awake from their shittiness.
And doing that doesn't ruin a soul.
But I don't want to kill the other person. I don't want to kill them. I think I think there's possibility to rehabilitate people. And I also think we're approaching an age of the next couple decades where technology is going to enable us to rewire the way that people behave, to where it's not even going to be necessary for me to exert physical force on somebody doing that. But then at any moment when someone is doing that, there is something that prevents them from doing it through their neurology that just does not let them do that. And I look forward to that day when there is no rape, there is no homicide, there's none of that, because people are wired differently, and actually we don't even need technology to do it. Swami Ananda's been on our show, and he's talked about how the key to everything is inner management. And if people just got much better at inner management, then we would live in a less greedy, less consumptive, less power driven, less fame driven, less money conspicuous consumption driven world. We would live in a much more peaceful, equanimous, loving, tranquil world that still has creativity, that still has innovation, that still has these driving forces for good, but is also not harmful and detrimental to other people. So that is this idea that you actually might not even need technology to rewire people's minds. You can just have spirituality and meditation and inner management help people to where they don't need to commit these acts. So I think it's a baseline level of like what is going on from the parent to the child. Why is a child at 5, how do they end up growing up in a violent environment that causes them to want to rape somebody, or that causes them to want to kill somebody? Why don't they have their basic needs met? We have so much wealth on this planet now, but we don't have the basic needs met for people where they can just not have to kill each other over money or violence or drugs or whatever, the food food or education or whatever it is. So I think there are plenty of other ways to target this issue, and that's I do have a little bit of an aggressive side, and I enjoy dancing with it, but I also I do much prefer dancing with my equanimous side.
What's the thing that I could do, like the best like target I could do, or behavior or way of being with you that could most likely bring that out? Like what's
the aggressive side?
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably try and choke me so that I have to punch you or something.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the violent.
Physical force against you. Who do you think would win in the scrap between you and I? We say that to each other. I've pushed these buttons in him, but it's a healthy confrontation.
Right.
You know, I do try to get this out of him.
I learn a lot from it, because if Ron was just like me, we would only learn about what we know, and this way he can dig into some of the equanimity stuff. I can dig into some of the ways that he drives himself.
It's where the yin and yang. You know, he's Paul McCartney. I'm John Lennon. You know, getting better all the time, and I'm saying it can't get much worse. It's a good relationship.
It's definitely entertaining. It's definitely entertaining.
There's been a couple members of our team that have told us, and Ron and I have talked about it too, to do a vlog of the studio of what it's like on a daily basis, but we don't have the budget.
Well,
to do
the
that.
thing I feel impressed about is
Join
just
us on Patreon so we can have the budget.
like totally everybody talking. Or listening right now,
yes.
Like the Patreon account. This guy's like doing amazing work.
Watch the bout between Alan and I. we should have a fundraiser with get the gloves, put a rink in here, get yourself tickets.
The thing that's like the constant thing that I'm getting actually from you is actually how much you care about him.
I do, very much so.
Like even I would imagine like the insight of like, man, you don't have enough darkness going on, or like whatever criticisms. I actually kind of feel, and I also felt it when you were, I think I saw in the example that you used about violence, you talked about a child, right? And then protecting the child, essentially. So that's the thing that I just get right here, is just a lot of care.
I used children, for example, because, what could a child have possibly done to deserve such a thing? I can't go to bat too much for adults because I'm not sure what happened right around the corner. I don't want to intervene in that scenario. Just keep walking, and I don't know what happened. But I for children, it's personal because I was a child, and we will maybe all be children again, unless Aubrey de Grey gets his way. That dirty rat bastard! If you're listening, you better stop what you're doing. But life extension, that scares the shit out of me too.
I think for me, there is something about, if I look at my life and all the stuff that I've been able to do and produce in the world that's made a difference, I don't think that comes from some like compassionate place in me. I think it actually comes from a deep sense of aggression. And
this is interesting. Keep going.
yeah, I think it's like, for example, and it's not something right up front, but I would bet, like, if you just kind of like get present, there's like probably a background hum that's going on with me where there's the possibility, like, if needed, that I can be a monster.
Me too.
Right? There's a hum, and there's something about that. If somebody's blocked from that, right?
Yeah, that's not good.
Blocked from that, then it's hard to imagine them getting much respect, right?
And them stumbling into scenarios where they can be taken advantage of by other people.
And what's great is that when it's integrated, right? When you're like, you get it, like you're both like good and bad, like we're all evil. Put enough pressure on us, like enough stress over anybody, and the darkest stuff can come out of them, right? Like you just put enough stress over anybody, and like they'll get more primitive. They'll go back to the back of their brain. They'll fight or flee. They'll be aggressive.
Yeah.
And if I'm cut off from that, right? If I'm like have something about like, say, this, I think this happens a lot with men, particularly that were like their father was really abusive, right? Where they'll just see all of that and call it bad, right? And then they'll identify with being not that.
Sure.
And then there's this kind of way in which there's almost no one there. Like there may be kind of life supporting, but they're not very life enhancing. So my connection to what you're saying is that there is a really beautiful, deep animal capacity for violence, right?
Yeah.
Aggression.
Yeah. So let's put it this way. When I've went through my 5MEO episodes, I've had a deep sense of aggression for being a collective warrior for global good, and that's it was an aggression. Didn't come from a place of compassion. It came from a place of aggression. I envisioned a lot of the terror and the crap that we did on the planet, and I was like, how did I let this happen? And I was pissed. And I was like, how did we let this happen? And then I was pissed. And then I'm now trying to figure out how to further accelerate all these different ways around the planet to try and move forward in a better way. And
totally. So that sense of outrage about that, like what I basically heard you say is, we have more money and the capacity to feed everybody all the time.
all the time, yeah.
So there's this kind of what I'm hearing you say is like, you look at that and there's this sense of outrage that not everyone's taken care of.
Yeah.
That sounds nuts to you.
Yeah.
Right? So like that, I like that.
Yeah.
Now I think where it goes haywire is when it goes to enrage. Like enrage is something else. Like enrage is more like, I am not in touch with the world. I'm not in touch with a kind of proactive openness to dissonance, and like, I'm not in touch with what I value. And instead of like being outraged at the world that mobilizes my energy and makes shit happen and like penetrates in those kinds of things, instead, like I stuff it or I hide it or I repress it and I don't know about it. And then one day under enough stress, right? Like somebody says one thing to me and I'll like shoot them, or I'll like beat someone up, or I'll do these, I'll be aggressive towards somebody that where the anger actually isn't. And that's the danger. And I think a lot of that, all of these killings that are going on, it's crazy how used to I am of hearing that some person like took out a machine gun and just went haywire. Like that's become like a normal thing.
Yeah.
I think that has something to do with someone's pissed and they're aiming at the wrong target.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So like if we make the energy bad or the aggression bad, I think we're just gonna turn it in the wrong direction again. But if you look at anybody powerful, like anybody that like commands your respect, there's a way in which you can feel into them. And a lot of times they don't look aggressive, but there's a background hum where there's an integration of something.
Can we call it that though from now on? Just this like background hum, like it's a tool on the tool belt that you can whip out when you need, but I don't quickly whip out that tool. I whip out the equanimity tool, I whip out the peace tool, I whip out the love and the care tool, and if needed in the background, there's the other tools that are on the belt, and I'm willing to whip those out, but I'm much less, it's only in these very last case ditch scenarios am I willing to whip those out. I propel that sense of of gentle peace across the planet, and that's what I care about a lot. I think it comes with a lot of meditation. These 10-day Vipassana meditation retreats have put me in a place where it's become more of a sense of it's in my and maybe part of my anger arising actually comes from knowing that other people don't want to try meditation.
So right there, I can feel that sense of aggression or power or dissonance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you feel that?
Yeah, definitely.
There's this.
Definitely. It actually
So is that
pisses,
like
it pisses me the fuck off, really. It does. It straight up pisses me the fuck off. There's thousands of years of practice of a certain technique of tuning into one's own body in moments of time and breath, and these stupid 25-year-olds running around the planet thinking that they're too good to try and meditate, or that they need Headspace or Calm or some app to learn how to meditate. That they're so hubristic, they're overly self-confident in themselves to not need to meditate. I don't need to practice that. No, this is thousands of years old. That would be like saying that, you know what, fuck glasses. They're thousands of years old, but who the fuck needs glasses? I'll drink water in some other way besides these containers. No, you still use glasses because they've been around for thousands of years.
Right.
So don't just throw things away. It's the Lindy effect.
What are you standing for? Like, what are you?
For peace.
Yeah.
For peace.
Totally. Okay, so that is connected to peace.
It's difficult
Is that better?
To understand.
I'm working on it for you. oh, he just softened up right there.
Ritik, will you, can you turn that light on for us so that Ron can get some light over there?
It's
right there. In
we're
front
good.
of the jacket.
We're good. Yeah.
No, leave it. Turn it on because it'll light up everything.
Let's see how it looks. Then I might have to make all kinds of crazy ass adjustments.
Okay, let's try.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, okay, there we go.
There we go.
No, wait. Right.
You good there?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah, this is good.
Okay.
This is good.
Okay. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Programming. Yeah, so what do you think about the little unpacking that just happened?
It's good, and he said, he's softening up now. But it's all in here. It's all about balance as well. I don't want to lean to either side. I want to hold hands of both energies: positive, negative, aggressive, or what's the opposite word of aggressive? I don't even know what it is. But just they're just energies that I don't. I want to say hi to both. And say, come on, let's go and do this life and get it over with and hope nobody fucks with us.
So interesting, just kind of watching his demeanor. Like there was this kind of sense where there was like a lot less kind of grumpiness or something, or like, there was a kind of a relaxing back, even in his tone.
True.
When
I
you
went
went the other way. I just think that's great.
It all started when you were talking about non-violence. When you were trying to resolve problems non-violently. Those are triggers for me because I'm not sure how. I mean, it may work for some, but there are some people that deserve a fucking punch to the face. Bottom line. That really just,
but if you train yourself to access that tool on the tool belt more often than you should be, then that's also a problem. So there you go.
So what I'm getting is like, it's where you're coming from. It's what it's connected to.
Yeah.
Like what I'm hearing is like, basically like, you're pissed off that people aren't meditating when they could. You're pissed off about like we're capable of taking care of everybody.
Yeah.
Right? And we're not. And when you
The
touch into
planet
that,
is
there's
so
something.
capable. Yeah.
There's something in there. I like that. I like whatever it is that you're connected with. And as you were talking about it, it was really cool. Like on one level, I was listening to what you were saying, and then there was this moment where I just kind of like relaxed back and just kind of received the being that was happening in front of me. And it was just this, I don't know, there was this kind of like solidarity and this sense of strength and power. And I just noticed it like had me just kind of relax back into myself. Like I'm a little bit more aware, I'm more awake. Thank you.
I think that you recognize that the place of aggression, and I like how you brought that up, can actually be for global good. There's a certain way to access it on the tool belt to do it. So for example, take the earth, take all of its potential, take everything that can actually happen on it, take the kids that are undernourished, take the kids that are not being taught about the morality or about their heart or their brain or their spirituality or the cosmos or evolution or the things that are just basic fundamental needs for them to move forward into a non-ignorant state of life. And think about what potential would be maximized if they were given the ability to learn computer science or given the ability to work on for emotional ethics or whatever. I would find that to be a much more fascinating world, to dig the Pacific garbage patch out of the ocean, to stop burying our garbage in landfills, and so, it's one thing to sit here and armchair philosophize about things, and it's another thing to be like, no, I actually know people that are working on these endeavors that I support, and that I will go to death. I will die for this planet.
So there's sovereignty. To me, that's sovereignty. Like this sense of, there's a sense of sovereignty, or you could also call it agency. You can call it like the essence of individuality. Is really, when you think about it, it's what most people call individuality is actually something that I would call counterdependence, right? Where, like, I know who I am because I resist you. I am that I am not you, right? And it's tricky because that looks kind of like independence, but it's not really. It's a vicious form of dependence because I need my opposite in order to know who I am. Like teenagers, developmentally, teenagers like are, they're biologically designed to like separate from the parent so that they really go into that. But some people never even leave there. And what I'm basically hearing you tap into is that there's something unreasonable in you. And that's the thing about having a strong sense of agency or individuality, is that, as my friend Mark Lewis says, he says, here's the essence of agency. I'm going to medical school to be a doctor, even though my parents want me to. And I think that really highlights something that I'm not making anything wrong. I'm not pushing against anything. I don't have a list of reasons or becauses that are kind of shoring up my position. Instead, there's a sense of like, no, I believe in this. I care about this because I do. Right? There's a solidarity in that. There's a deep sense of solaceness in that. And if you look at history, as far as I can tell, people, like individuals that have shifted paradigms are like, to me, they're like almost pure mythic examples of agency.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, people like that. Where it's like, like Mahatma Gandhi, here's a great example of this in the movie. If I remember right, the scene opens and he's burning some petition from the government. And he's like, India must be free, that's what I believe, and so I will not obey. And he burns some government paper or something, and he walks up to throw it in the trash, and the English people are just like, what are you doing? And they come and just like, beat him up, right? And he falls down. And he doesn't go, hey, you fuckers, like, I'm gonna da-da-da-da. No, he takes all that, and he gets back up, and he picks it up, and he walks further. And they're like, what are you doing? And they just keep beating him, right? And then he falls down, and you keep waiting, because these guys look like total assholes.
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
not the source of where he's coming from. Where he's coming from is he's for something. He's not against something. And that is such a rare thing. And it's one of the things that I think
Yeah.
circling really cultivates, is that deep sense of individuality, of like,
Yeah.
what is it in you that's deeper, that's worth fighting for, right? That's only you can bring, the particular unique slant or spark of God that kind of like comes through you.
Yeah.
That in itself doesn't need a justification, right? It is its own justification. And so when you're around somebody like that, what's interesting is that you could say agency, the moment there's agency is the moment it goes to communion, right? Relationship. And so like a great example of that is like, you know, by the end of the movie, all of India is like, is like not eating with Gandhi. Because Gandhi won't like be violent, he won't make anyone wrong, he's just says, this is what I believe, and I will, if it does not happen, I just will not eat. Right? And that sense of nonviolence. See, that's a level of like integrated aggression at almost like a transpersonal level. And but notice what happens is his singularity created like a whole movement. Same thing with Martin Luther King. If you ever watch that from the angle of agency, and you look at it as like almost like a pure example of it, he's like, I have a dream, and that motherfucker is like, you can just feel him connected to the earth, and it's just coming, boom. And then it turns around, and then there's like thousands of people, right? Agency goes to communion. And if you don't have a strong sense of agency, you can't be in a relationship with other people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You'll be constantly
Correct.
looking to them to define you.
Yeah.
Right? You'll always be in a sense of instability.
Yeah.
You'll either merge with them, you'll be against them, you'll like.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. You're right about the for something, and the being for something, and having a sense of agency around that. Even to go as far as to say that even Kanye West just tweeted about it online, which was that if you have incredible foresight, stay stubborn. And that, I think, is a lot of what the people that you listed have, is agency and foresight, and then knowing how to just stay stubborn to that thing and to not be molded by these external forces around you. And circling does, I like how you called it the spark or the slant of God through you. What is it? Like, okay, the evolution, the cosmos birthed your nervous system. What is that spark of the cosmos that's running through you and out your heart and your brain and your mouth every single day? If you don't know what that spark or that slant is, we will help you find that spark or slant. You will find it in yourself, but we can help teach these interesting strategies that have been taught for a long time. Again, meditation for thousands of years, in order for you to better figure out what you love doing every single day and what value you want to bring to the world. And creativity is one of the best ways to do that, and creativity is right now kind of at war because of the 9 to 5. The 9 to 5 is kind of killing creativity in many ways. And a lot of children are not able to express their creativity because of the way that, even on the last episode, we were just talking about how parents have even scheduled out children's times to go do all these things, and that the kids don't even have the availability to think for themselves, like the shower thoughts, accessing the parts of your brain when you're just in the default state.
Totally.
So I agree with you about agency, and I think agency is crucial. I think circling does a good job at that. Maybe we should now loop back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, and what you were going to say was, what I was asking you about is like, so you described kind of like what happened, some of the things that happened in circling.
Yeah.
How did it impact you? Like, how did you see it impact other people? Like, how did it ride through your nervous system, and what did it have you think, and what did it have you feel, and what did it have you imagine, and like, what was the experience it created in you?
The relationship when you walk up to someone and you just say like, You're maybe at the you're at the checker stand, or at the cashier stand, and like, here's my thing. Hi, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. Here's my card. Paid. Done. You've left. Circling is the exact opposite of that. Circling is the literal opposite of that. It is the most deep dive into someone else's life that you can possibly achieve. And I think it's even deeper than a marriage with someone. You can get married and you can circle with your partner for your whole life, and you can get really deep with them, totally. But I think there are many people that don't even have the ability, that have been married for 20 years, that have never went as deep as they do when they go and sit down to circle.
Yeah.
And so just because of that by itself that's mind blowing. So, so for me, seeing people in the state of the deepest surrender, vulnerability, I cried for others, I cried for myself. I love crying. I think crying is not a bad thing at all. I think everything you see in the news about never crying, and about being a warrior, and about only being a warrior, and pulling yourself up by your boots out of poverty and going and crushing it into the world, I think that's all, it's all a little bit too much of a story for you to forget about everything else. And everything else is the crying, it's the emotions, it's the vulnerability, it's the feeling, it's all of these different feelings that you can experience and access to and be in the moment of, that we typically don't access enough of in each other. And when you do want to go and bring something to the world, it's not about just pick yourself up and go and do that thing. It's more so about, what is the world around you? How is the world built around you to help you actually achieve that thing? Because if the world is literally around you, zip code literature is so solid. You can be born in Pack Heights, or you can be born in Southside Chicago. There's a big difference in life outcome. And so if there you go. It's that much more difficult to get out of Southside Chicago to become somebody that is self-actualized and that is bringing value to the world than it is when you live in a $10 million house. It's just completely different tracks of self-actualization and ability to achieve something. And so the environment around the person, if we're constantly going and saying, hi, how are you? Good, okay, thank you, bye, versus like, no, how do you feel?
Yeah.
How do you feel? And exploring that and waiting on it and being patient with it. And paraphrasing how somebody feels. The amount of times that conversations end in today's world because people don't know how to paraphrase, people don't know how to ask the next level of depth of question, is just egregiously high. So you'll have Guy tell you, he'll be like, I just came back from New York, and then your response will be, oh cool, I've been to New York before. Okay. Great, that's a way to have a conversation. There's also the way of being like, oh, you were just in New York? What were you doing there? What did I just do? I brought you a level lower, deeper into your journey, into what you were doing. What were you doing in New York? Oh, I was attending a summit learning about education. Oh, cool. Why do you care about education? Going deeper again. What's your emotional draw to education? How do you feel when you think about education? These deeper and deeper levels of questions that you can get to in somebody. And sure, you might not have time when you're trying to get a coffee to ask somebody what impact they want to make in the world, but I promise you that if you at least aim to do it more often and have that type of more intimate time with people at these deeper levels, that same ability of connection will apply to every single one of your relationships, including your family, your work, your partner, your even the person that's making a coffee. So, which will soon be a robot. It already is a robot, but yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So get retrained, basically. We've talked about that.
Could someone
Absolutely.
grab me some more water?
I noticed that
Sure.
too.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, that thing when you said kind of dropping levels of depth in basically how you listen to somebody. So circling is, here's the thing I just really want to emphasize, is like there's a lot of different ways to like describe what it is, but the thing I want to just make really clear that you don't do circling to get good at circling, right? You do circling because what is to develop or access or deepen a particular aspect of being a human being, right? Such that when you're not circling, right, your baseline is just more relational.
Exactly.
Right? There's more of a permeability, there's more of an openness, there's more of a pre-reflective sense of belonging, right? A sense of curiosity, like a vulnerability to be awestruck, a vulnerability to have the things in the world grip your attention, to shine forth. And that is really why you want to circle. And so there's different ways that it looks, right? But I want to just kind of go back a little bit and like talk about a little bit how it started, because it's a little bit like being in a Twilight Zone or something, being me, right? I had no intention in doing something called circling. I had no plans on it. I didn't have any ideas about it. I didn't even know that there was a thing that I ended up being somehow gifted at a particular angle of it. Like, I didn't know any of that stuff. Burning Man, met my friend Jerry Candelaria, walking out on the playa. Somebody kind of went off. Jerry's kind of he was this kind of like neurotic, deeply heart-based, beautiful being that was also he was just neurotic and kind of controlling, but he was a big energy. And so we're walking around, and he wants to keep everyone together, right? And then Damien, his name was CJ back then, goes running off into the sex camp, right? And so I could just instantly feel Jerry's like every sphincter in his body kind of pulled in, and there goes Damien. I was like, all right, we got to go pull him out. So we get into the sex camp, we find Damien, we bring him back out. And so we end up way beyond, in the middle of the desert. We couldn't even see the lights. I think I can't remember if it was 96 or 98. It was one of the two. I'm terrible with dates. But
I think it was 98.
Yeah. And we ended up just like a classic Burning Man playa experience, where in the middle of nowhere, here all of a sudden is this bizarre art kind of like spiral teepee thing, right? And so we just go inside of it and we sit down in a circle. And you could feel the dissonance, you could feel the conflict in the air. And I just started getting interested in the conflict. I started interested, like, what is this kind of thing going on? And at a certain point, before we even recognized it, like the conversation or the interaction left the level of the conflict and it ended up going on Damien. And there was just a way that Jerry and I and everyone there started relating to that particular moment in such a way that we all had this experience of whatever it was about Damien that makes Damien Damien, like all the veils kind of like peeled back, and
Yeah.
whatever that was kind of shined forth.
Yes.
And it was utterly stunning.
Yes.
It was absolutely stunning. And it's like that particular feeling, even if you have, it's one of those things that, and I think everybody could probably like knows what I'm talking about, even if you've never had this experience, you just kind of know it, where even if you've never experienced that experience before, there's this quality of when you do, it's a deep recognition,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, because it's something so close in to being a human being that there's just a stunning beauty to that spark of God, if for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is
How do you take that to everybody?
well, here's what's interesting is that there was just spontaneously, of course, that was the thing I got interested in. That's the thing that everybody got interested in. And we just started following that, and it just naturally went to the next person.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, there's
Yeah.
like, as this is happening, it's like, I wasn't there sitting there thinking about like, boy, we're going through an interesting process right now.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it was just like, I was gripped. Something had my attention, and time disappeared. And then it went to the next, and it's something similar to the next person. And it went to the next person, the next person.
But also uniquely different to the way that God comes through them. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally. And afterwards, basically, for all intents and purposes, like, Jerry comes up to me, and he's like, he stopped, and it's like 12 hours later, right? And now the sun's coming up, right?
12 hours. That's,
Totally. Time disappeared.
yeah.
And he looks at me, and he's like, he points back to that where we were, and he's like, that. And I was like, yeah, that. We didn't have a word for it, but we recognized something. And I was like, that. And at some point, both of us just stopped, and we just put our hands on it. We just committed to whatever that was. We were just going to bring it out into the world. And that's basically was the handshake that I had no idea that was going to change not only the trajectory of my life, but it was going to change. It was going to change my understanding of even who I was,
Yes.
and what life was, and what being was.
Yes.
I had no idea. And I would say that I'm still learning about what we were pointing to. I'm still learning about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Most of the time when we're circling, I think what I'm doing is I'm going, what are we doing? What is this thing that's happening? There's something so alive about it,
Yeah.
that it's gripped my attention, and in paying attention to it, and in being interested in it, what it's taken to be interested in it is a transformation of myself, like is a deepening of my own attention, my ability to pay attention, my ability to see, my ability to like make distinctions, my ability to open my heart.
Yep.
Going, what? Because if you look at something really, really profound enough to really see it, the seeing needs to be profound enough of a seeing to be able to apprehend it. So there's this, for me, circling is this experience of a deep kind of listening, a deep kind of seeing that is really tapped into the most real thing that I can think of or experience in the universe, like called another human being. If you think about it, I think about this all the time. I'm constantly thinking about this. Is on one level, when we circle, basically what we're doing, if you kind of like we were a fly on the wall, you see a bunch of people sitting together, and then just basically bringing our attention on each other, and sometimes just one person, and then out of that, everyone kind of walks away awestruck, changed, like all these crazy things happen. They have these deep realizations, all this kind of stuff. There's something going on in an individual that I don't think it's like the individual is sacred. I think the individual is the sacred. And that's and I think that that's why when we just really bring an open attention about what is right now with each other, what exactly are we bringing our attention to? Well, if you really think about it, as far as my understanding, is like the most complex thing that the universe has ever produces is this like this cerebral cortex, right? It's the most complex thing in the most sophisticated, the most complex part of the known universe, as far as we can tell. So on some level, what I'm looking at is the most special part of the universe, the most articulated, the most the most realized. In fact, you could say human beings seem to be the place, or the most vulnerable place, where you could say the cosmos thinned itself out enough to the point where it thinned itself out to itself and it could recognize itself.
Yes.
And that recognition is all right here. It's all right here. And if you just look at it, I think everyone knows that experience of, well, we would do these, like in advanced courses, we really kind of refine this and study this. You know, I can intensely look at that glass. I can intensely be with that flower or a wall or even like an animal or a tree. But if I look at another in the eye, there is something that goes on there that is unlike anything else in the world.
Yeah.
Right? And whatever that is, it seems to be something like an experience of pure non-neutrality. There's like a sense of existential obligation in a certain sense. There's anxiety that comes up. There could be terror that comes up. There could be beauty. There could be, but it's anything but neutral. It's anything but indifferent. To like really make eye contact with somebody and be with somebody, I don't think we understand what we're actually seeing. But if we stay with that and we keep looking with our eyes, with our ears, with our heart, and we just keep feeling into what is it, who are you? Who am I with you? Like what's happening is we are together, and we keep looking at that. We end up having these like life-changing moments. And so I don't exactly know why that is, but what it's done for me and for a lot of people in my life is it seems to open up a deep sense of wonder, right? A deep sense of wonder and a deep sense of humanity and a sense of like a wanting to drop in with people, an interest in people, right?
Yeah.
What's it like to hear all that for you?
The little stretchy stretch. Oh, okay. The sacred,
Yeah.
not just sacred, but the sacred. Yeah. Inside of every skull, that and body that the cosmos has birthed, that now we can then reflect on not only how we got here, but also who we are.
Yeah.
And then the next step is, where are we going? And I break down the cosmos and evolution and consciousness and futurism in this way because I think these three pillars of evolution, consciousness, and futurism, I think these three things together are basically what
was it? Was it evolution?
Evolution, consciousness, and futurism. Because this is the cosmos birthing the earth and birthing us.
I like that.
And then now we look at each other in this very complex way, knowing you look at a glass, you see nothing. Look at someone else's eyes, you see everything. And there's a very, very huge difference between those two things, and it almost puts people into an uncomfortable state to look at other people in the eyes.
Yeah.
And then the conversation about where are we going with futurism is really important, because if we don't have a game plan,
Yeah.
we're gonna experience a potentially a species extinction, and we kind of want our kids to live on. So just to tap into more of what you were saying, yeah, I do think that what's going on between people is you can't put words. It's so difficult to put words on the description of it, but to tune into those finest moments of being, the most fine moments in its deepest nuance, in its deepest complexities, and that long process that it takes of looking. I mean, for me, what I felt while you were speaking was I felt really relaxed. I felt very much like you were speaking on behalf of everybody that's ever wanted to voice their opinions about how complex it is to try and talk to another person. And so that's kind of what circling does, and it does a lot of things like you said, but and you know, when people leave our show and say that was the best interview I've ever been with, that's the best conversation I've ever had, I felt so alive, I felt like I could be myself, I felt like the way that I was communicating was great because it was amplified by you, that those sorts of moments for me are my most alive as well, because then I get the chance to, or some of my most alive, because then I get the chance to feel what it feels like for someone else to have went through a period of time with me, feeling like they were able to communicate better these wisdoms that they have about different aspects of existence. And that's very similar to what you do with circling.
And I really appreciate the thing that you said about, you know, when people walk away and they say like, God, that was the best interview I've ever had, but in some way they feel impacted or changed or have a different perception of themselves or what they're doing. I think what that highlights is this thing that I think that really at the base of it is really what circling is practicing, which is like a radical kind of listening. And it's interesting when you think about it, that listening, it's funny, there's lots of, you know, if you go to the bookstore, there's lots of stuff about communication, right? There's lots of books and information about communication. And obviously there is, because like it's really clear, like to be a good communicator is almost everything, right? If you can't communicate, you can be brilliant and like you can be amazing, but if you can't relate with other people, there's no way that that'll make any difference in the world. However, usually I think when people think about communicating, they think about talking, right? They think about saying the right thing.
Yeah.
But there's something, and I think that it's missed is a hint on its nature, which is listening, is that ontologically speaking, like listening is prior to speech. Like speech, right, somebody doesn't talk and then an ear shows up. No, there must be a listening that calls forth speech. And my experience is like if you really, really learn how to listen, like really listen, you don't have to worry about what to say, because all speaking is a function of listening. So like right now I'm speaking to in some way, your listening is shaping what I'm saying. Like all the things that you bring to bear, all of the frameworks, all the things that I can be aware of and that I'm not aware of, that you're aware of that I'm not aware of, that are shaping me saying this thing right now in this moment is really a function of the depth of your listening. And to get kind of like, to kind of draw on that a little bit closer to home, if we think about it, how the hell do we end up with an identity, right? On the most basic level. Like, how do we know that we're a person and that we have a name and a first name and a last name and we have a nature and a personality? We only know that through the network of relations that we were born into.
Yeah.
You know, you could say that like, I am of and a function of the gaze that grew me.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
like the quality of attention in my household when I was a kid to whatever depth that it, like depth or lack of depth, was able to see whatever was true in me and call it out and then speak it to me and relate to it. And something about in that interaction constituted myself. And what's interesting is like I think it's hard to comprehend to what degree like that we fundamentally don't understand that in how we conceive of relationships. And a good example of that are dating sites. Like I don't have any problem with dating sites. I think dating sites are cool. I've never used them. I've pretty much never been single. I was married for 15 years and in a relationship for the last 7. But it's interesting because dating sites they presuppose what a human being is. And it's like, if you think about it, they look at human beings as kind of like a thing, a hunk of stuff with qualities that you can measure. And they're like, all right, if we take this hunk of stuff and we are able to measure the qualities and just the right thing and figure out the algorithms and we connect those things together, then they're going to join together and then they'll live happy forever after. But the thing that's really ignorant to is to what degree that actually, if we get into a relationship, I will be like who I am will be constituted through that relationship.
Yeah.
And we all know that, right? We all know that. Like we've had friends, all of us have had friends and been impacted by people both positively and negatively that have fundamentally shaped who we are. And I would say that circling really sees that and takes that really seriously. Of like, in a certain way, there's of like where we really learn how to deeply listen and be with you as you are. Martin Buber, the Jewish philosopher, theologian, the existentialist, he really, I think, points to it in a profound way. And the way he would put it is that he said that human beings, existentially speaking, are a relation, right? You're always in a relationship with your environment, with other people, like with your clothes, with your thoughts. There's no such thing as a sole proprietorship or a thing that then relates. No, you are a relationship. And the way he puts it is that you're in one of two relations. He called it an I-thou or an I-it. And he said that I-thou and I-it are spoken as one word, right? So there's no like I without a thou or an it, and there's no it without an I, and there's no thou without an I, that they're a relation. So they're one word. And he said, and this is, I really like the way that this makes the world kind of come forward. He says like, when I see you as an it, what that means is I'm seeing you as a means to an end, right? Like, or when I see that cup, like for example, that cup is an it. I see it as a means to my end of drinking. But I can also like look at you and see you as a means to my own ends of needing approval, right? Or I can see you as a means to my own end of being liked. Or I can see you as a means to an end on some level that you're an it. But then he said what's a lot rare, but is possible, is an I-thou relationship. And an I-thou is where I see you as an end in yourself. And you can kind of feel that, right? You kind of feel that sense of like, even like right now, it's like if I just kind of see you as a thou, as like that there's something, in other words, there's something that's fundamental about you. There's something that's displayed in you that on some level is mysterious, is endless, and is an end in itself, like for its own sake, right? As I like see you that way, it takes a different eye arises with that, right? It's a different eye that can see you as a thou. And there are those moments where it's like, where for me it's this experience of where you look like the smallest little grain of sand, like you see the whole world. Like that's, you could say that circling in a real way is an I thou practice, right? Like how do we sit and be with each other and really, really pay attention?
Yeah.
And as we say, be with what is, right? And it's funny, and I think you kind of like, you spoke to like how difficult that is to do, surprisingly difficult that is to do, just to be with you as you are, as it happens, without trying to improve it, without trying to solve it, without trying to fix it. Because in all those ways, and you can feel it, the moment that you do it, like I constitute you as an it, and there's something else going on there, right? So like withdrawing that and just returning to like being with what is, like what's happening with you right now.
That really resonates. We think about how we frequently try and see someone else as a means to something that we want, and then also think about how we try and problem solve everything. Everything.
Yeah.
And we don't, and when we see you as an end in the way that you are at this moment and at the next moment, we just try and explore and dig and understand and relate.
Yeah.
And communicate rather than try and solve and think about the future and how can I help, and then it's different. Yeah.
And it's like and this is where you can look at circling as like a methodology. You could look at it as like, you know, as a practice. And if you look at circling as a practice, you could say it's like just like any practice, right? Yoga, for example, like you go and do these intense stretches, like these concentrated stretches, and like you're like stretching and you're adjusting and you're like fine-tuning these poses, and like you're training your mind and you're consciously moving towards discomfort and you're changing your relationship with that discomfort. And you're doing that not so that you can do that particular pose well. It's so that when you're not doing yoga and you're walking outside, your fundamental baseline is more open.
And that's
right?
exactly what you were mentioning. I totally agree. And that's kind of what meditation does. It's not so that you can just you just changes your cadence every single day, and circling changes your cadence in your relationships with people and the way that you view people. And that's the same way that any really mastery does, is it changes the way that you kind of behave through the flow. So, all right. We have a lot more to unpack and talk about, but I know that we have to be kind to our just to time, and we can do more.
What time is it right now?
It's 5:22 now, but
Cool.
But we can still ask you just one question, and then we'll do more conversation soon. What do you think is the most beautiful thing in the world?
It's like, it's funny, like what I actually think is the most beautiful thing in the world is the ability to see the most beautiful thing in the world. Is in my girlfriend Brienne, who I'm like so profoundly in love with. It's like crazy. She's like, Guy, you have beauty eyes. And she always says that, and I'm like, I love that. I love that. I actually think that that's the thing that's the most beautiful thing for me, is when I see people have a seeing that can like see the deepest, most profound, and the most particular and minute. Like the ability to see beauty itself. I think is beautiful. And I think that's what, like, I think my life seems to be dedicated to, right? Is to be able to be more, to be continuously more vulnerable to being continuously awestruck, to be vulnerable to moments of beauty in the most simplest interaction, the most simplest thing. And there's something about to gesture and like see somebody and open your gaze in that way and invite them in to a dialogue. It could just, like what you're talking about, it could just be with the guy in the grocery store, where there's that moment where we share something. And that's the thing I'm curious about. Like if we, like right here, there's you and I here, and like we're can you feel a connection?
Yeah.
What is it? Well, like, what is it that we're sharing? Like, what is that thing that we're sharing?
I think it's a little bit more of a gentle touch. It's a different vibration.
It's a deep mystery to me.
Yeah, deep mystery.
But it's very easy to recognize when it's there.
You know when two people are arguing on like CNN or Fox News and they're not even giving each other like any love or generosity or patience or anything? We're the exact opposite of that right now.
This makes me think about something that Heidegger talked about. I've always really appreciated. He's for me, it is another thing about circling. Circling is very deep. It's not psychology. It's more of a deep-lived kind of philosophical practice in the deepest sense. Like the sense of like where knowledge at a certain level, like knowledge itself becomes love, right? Knowing becomes the experience of love.
Yeah.
And he says that, and how he puts it is, and I think it was a lecture he did at the anniversary of the death of some like extraordinary physicist. And so he gets up there and he says, you know, if we were to look at a grand painting, right, and we were to see it, we should look at it for a long time and be patient and not demand that it be immediately intelligible. It's like, and if the poet, right, if Rilke were here in the person, right, and he were to read his poetry, we would want to hear it again and again by the poet himself. And again, without much protest, we wouldn't demand that it be immediately intelligible to us, right? And he kind of goes into like, and if the scientist were here explaining his theories of like cosmic unity or whatever, that like two people in the audience at most would comprehend anything that he was saying, yet again, we should still not demand that it be immediately intelligible. And he just goes on and he says, so let me give you a hint on how to listen to the lecture. And I love this. He says that listen in a way, if you refrain from listening to the lecture as a series of propositions, we can begin to follow the movement of showing.
Yeah.
If we can and that's the really important thing, is a kind of openness that doesn't presuppose the world.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are walking around with a bunch of presuppositions that they're not aware of. And they don't notice that they're constituting the world in terms of what they think.
Yeah.
Right?
And that decreases their open-mindedness, which is one of the reasons why we have so much polarization and bias.
And what he's saying is that, and this really speaks to my own experience of what it's been like being with people, the impact that it's had on me, of like really deeply relating to people, is that when you engage with another, it's almost instant access to what is beyond what you can think. Like you and I could sit here for 1,000 years, and I can like ask you tons of questions, and you can tell me everything that you know about yourself, and we'll never reach the bottom of you, right?
And that's a lot of what we have dived into today. That's a lot of what we will dive into moving into our next conversations. I'm so grateful to be able to sit down with you, Guy, and I'm grateful to do a circling here on Monday in our studio. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to bring a lot of people out to come and sit down. We'll do
It'll be fun to like just see it live.
See it live. We'll do some conversation off screen. We'll do some conversation on screen. You guys will get to see what that's like right here on Monday evening. And thank you very much for tuning in. We appreciate you so much. Share this content with other people if you enjoyed the idea of knowing how to tap into this moment and diving deeper into the conversations. We'll put Circling Institute link in the bio to check them out. Give us a like, give us a comment, tell us what you think, smash that subscribe button. Join us in the movement to rebirth the public intellectual and to inspire people to build the future across all these different domains. Join us on Patreon. We need your help. We need to fund the studio, fund our electricity, our internet, everything. We need to fund that.
Hit that Patreon link.
Hit the Patreon button. We'd greatly appreciate you joining us. Thanks to our producing partner, Ron Vargas. Greatly appreciate you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys soon. Peace.